So, good evening. Once again, welcome to the United Nations. My name is Maher Nasser. I'm the director of the Outreach Division in the United Nations Department of Public Information. And as Christina mentioned at the beginning, I'm here to help moderate the session with the cast and a creator of the show. Welcome. This is the Trusteeship Council. So this is the name of the chamber that we're in. So if you want to join the discussion and using social media, please use the hashtag incorporated, hashtag climate change, hashtag global goals, and since today is World Television Day, hashtag World TV Day, 21st of November. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to the 3 stars of Incorporated, Julia Ormond, Dennis Haysbert, and Sean Teale, as well as the showrunner and executive producer, Ted Humphrey. So Ted is a multiple award-winning executive producer and showrunner of Incorporated. He was most notably an executive producer, writer, and director of the award-winning series The Good Wife, which ended its 7-year run on CBS this spring. Julia Ormond is a multiple award-winning actress whose breakout role came in 1994 in Legends of the Fall. In 2010, she won an Emmy Award for her supporting role in HBO film Temple Grandin, and she has been honored with the World Economic Forum Crystal Award, and she was the first and a former Goodwill Ambassador against trafficking and slavery for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and the founder of the Alliance to Stop Slavery and End Trafficking, that was the origin, architect, and convener of Transparency in Supply Chains Law in California that passed in 2010. Dennis Haysbert acting career spans over 30 years. He played President David Palmer in the hit series 24, for which he received a Golden Globe nomination and 2 Screen Actor Guild nominations. You may also recognize him from his commercial for Allstate Insurance. Mr. Haysbert has been an advocate, and he has been an advocate in the fight against AIDS. Sean Teale, to my right, was born in London, where he intended to pursue a career in rugby or soccer, but was convinced to switch to acting after being spotted in a school play by an agent. He first garnered attention for his role in the hit British TV series Skins and made his feature film debut in the independent comedy We Are the Freaks. We're also...
No, she gets that, he gets that. We don't have that. Thank you.
We're also very pleased to have with us Cassie Flynn as a climate change advisor at the United Nations Development Program at UNDP. Cassie visited the Incorporated Writers' Room in Los Angeles to provide her expert insights and experiences relevant to the storylines of Incorporated. And she comes to us straight from Marrakesh, where she was at the climate change COP22. So she was on the plane about 5 hours ago. And I don't know how she's sitting here with open eyes. So welcome, Cassie. So today, as I said before, is World Television Day. And I think one of the things we have been trying to do in the Creative Community Outreach, United Nations Creative Community Outreach Initiative, is use film, television to reach wider audiences with maybe messages and issues that are on the UN's agenda that are discussed in these chambers by delegates of member states into the homes of audiences around the world or in theaters in the cinema. So we met earlier with Ted Humphrey, actually in the house of Norman Lear last time I saw Ted before tonight, where we at the time spoke about the role Norman Lear worked in bringing social issues in television in the 1970s and 80s. So, Ted, how do you balance the role of television in terms of entertainment at the same time, and of course companies want to generate profit, but at the same time to get across an idea or a thought or some, like what we spoke about earlier, what you said earlier, some awareness on climate change ramifications if we don't act now? You have to press the button under, and then it goes red, and then you...
Excellent. There we go. It's a great question because, you know, our number one job is to tell a good story. And it's the job, it's the duty that we owe to our audience. It's the duty that we owe to the studios and networks who finance the things that we do. But I think I mentioned in my introduction that I prefer the term speculative fiction because it allows you to ask important questions. And I think there is a duty on television to do that. And you mentioned Norman Lear, and I think it was Mike Farrell who was one of the stars of MASH, who always spoke of television as being maybe the greatest means of communication that had ever been devised for the simple reason that it beamed itself directly into your living room. I think it's been supplanted by the internet at this point, but it's still a very powerful medium, and in fact, a lot of people who watch the show will watch it over the internet, and it will be beamed into their home. So, you know, I think with different kinds of shows, there's different balancing acts, and with this show, the story and subject matter lend themselves to asking these kinds of provocative questions, and it's great to be able to do that.
Thank you. I mean, of course, you mentioned climate change, which is one of the issues that are being addressed by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that world leaders agreed here in 2015 in September that we would work to achieve them in 2030. Let me ask you a question. Did you know about the goals when you were thinking of the series, or did the link come to you later?
I did not.
Can you just make sure that...
I did not know about the goals, and I want to be clear that the series was created initially by Alex and David Pastor, who are two filmmakers from Spain, who are my colleagues. We do the show together. They could not be here tonight. And they came up with the idea for the show, you know, I think initially because they were watching a lot of what was going on in the world, climate change being just one of those things, the advancing sort of power of corporations and the increasing, you know, division between haves and have-nots and lots of other things, and kind of thinking to themselves, how do we tell a story that deals with these things, but that's still, again, an exciting story where people don't feel like you're feeding them medicine. They feel like, you know, they're watching something, and if they don't get any of those things out of it, then that's okay. But if they do, and if it sort of encourages people to think a little bit, then that's all the better. And then when I got involved, you know, I felt it was something that really wasn't on TV right now, which is what I always look for, and the rest is history, and here we are.
So maybe a question to Julia, Dennis, or Sean, whichever of you wants to take it. Television has gone through a renaissance, and the common perception is that it has, in many ways, surpassed film in terms of quality, the diversity of subject matters, and the audience engagement. Do you agree with that statement, or do you still think that the big screen is the main?
Do I have it?
Yeah.
Okay. I think to a certain extent that's true. I think we will always enjoy feature films because it is our choice to go out to the theater to go see it. With television, you know, basically the audience has to invite you in. And as far as long-form storytelling is concerned, I think television is very unique and a positive force in that way. I think it's equal. It all depends on the script, and I don't know, everyone. I think everyone here agrees that my decision to take this role was because of the script and the story that they were telling, because it's the kind of story that's not, you know, it hasn't been told. Mm-hmm. And we're just getting into the foray of, you know, climate change and what's going on with our planet, and doing it in a way that, you know, everybody can understand it and really grasp it.
I think you mentioned storytelling. I think we all recognize that before we start going to school and learning how to read and write, we actually learn a lot of things through storytelling, bedtime stories, stories that our parents tell us, and the stories that we tell our children. And at the UN, I think this is part of the partnership that we appreciate, because I don't know how many of you have read UN documents, but if you ever have an insomnia, go and read one of those and you'll fall asleep. So we always welcome and appreciate the opportunity to actually work with television production. So Julia, you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to add that what I love about the way that that the Pastor Brothers and Ted have approached this piece is that it's a mix of something that has social messaging within it by presenting a world in a commercial way. And I think what's interesting is being given the opportunity to talk at the UN about to what degree is it accurate, to what degree is it based on the real world, or to what degree is the speculation projection. But at the same time, I think for me, what I see in storytelling is the value of people being able to feel and experience a world emotionally and get into the actual lives of the characters, the stories that they're going through, and the choices that they're able to make as characters, and how everybody's under stress, and to sort of be able to look back and see, after you've experienced it as a fiction, to be able to come away from that experience and say, well, actually, if we don't make certain choices today that are very real and right in front of us, then that's going to be all of our reality. So, yeah.
I also wanted to add, you gave a cure to insomnia. If you're really tired and you need to stay awake, just tune in, because I pull some miraculously strange faces on the show, and they'll keep you up if you really need to stay up. That's the cure.
Ted, you wanted to add something?
Just that we like to freeze those faces in editing and send them to Sean. It's a game that we play. You know, so.
Has any of you visited areas on the planet that have been really affected by climate change, that the things that we have seen as imaginary, but some places and for many people's lives, it is a reality? Have you seen and visited any of those places?
I was going to joke darkly that I live in Los Angeles, so that's, beyond that I have not. Anyone else? This person has.
Well, I've been around the world, I think, 5 times in the last 8 years. And I haven't seen anything to match what I've seen in Los Angeles and in New Orleans, and places here in the United States. I've been around the world a couple of times with the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and once with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And we didn't spend a lot of time in the places that we were. But like I said, the devastation that's going on in the 63 trillion gallons of water that we've lost already in California, I've seen nothing quite like it.
Cassie, do you want to add something? I'm sure you have.
Yes. In my work as a climate change advisor, I am part of the group of people at the UN that try to help countries come to solutions on climate change, both in the negotiating room when they're talking about treaties around climate change, but also on the ground. And on the ground, I think something that we can all learn, and I think this is what is so powerful about the show, is that climate change affects everyone. It doesn't matter if you are in a small country, if you are in a large country, if you are in a powerful country. Climate change is everywhere. And certainly in California, with 99% of Californians feeling the impact of drought, that is very, very real. And so it requires a solution by all of us, because it impacts every single person's life on the planet.
Thank you, Cassie. Julia, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think I would reinforce. I mean, I have traveled the world and seen stuff, whether it's in refugee camps and how climate is affecting people there, and resources and access to power or access to general human rights. But in terms of California, I think probably the most dramatic thing was we had thousands of emaciated seal pups washing up on California's coast in Malibu, up and down the coast, and it was, I think people unpacked it in terms of it was a slight rise in sea temperature that had kicked in an algae that created a virus for them that killed them off, and local resources couldn't deal with the number of seal pups. So you would walk along. I went for a walk along the beach in Malibu, and there were 6 dead, emaciated seal pups, and you could see them more coming in. And so I take my hat off to you, and I take my hat off to Cassie in terms of trying to connect the dots in the ecosystem of all the different interrelated issues that are either impacted by climate change or geographical areas, but also how the solutions have to be integrated as well.
Yeah. I mean, we speak about climate change, but of course it's one of the issues that come in the episodes. But one of the things that struck me is, of course, we know that there's a lot of inequalities in the planet today. And actually one of the 10th Sustainable Development Goals is about reducing inequalities. And here we see a world where inequalities have by far gone to, and Sean, your character comes from the red zone and is in the green zone and is on a mission to look for, I think, your former
love, yes.
His former love. Now, looking into, do you think the character would go back to the red zone once they found their loved one, or would they want to continue living in the green zone? What sort of action do you think in terms of, I don't know, maybe that's covered in the 10 episodes you want to spill the beans, but...
Yeah. Well, I think he's found someone in Laura in the green zone that also sort of holds the world that they're surrounded by, and in a reverence, it's not something that they want to engage in. I think what the show tries to depict, I guess, and whether my character would probably want to leave, is the difference between green and red zones. You know, you have everything that you want in the green zone. You have that 1% world that have all the opulence and all the resources and financial backing they need, all the safety and security and medical care that they require, more so than the 99% that have nothing in these barren, decaying, raw red zones. But it doesn't have humanity. It's really sterile. It's not, you know, those old phrases of money can't buy you happiness and whatever else, but obtaining and acquiring all of these things and not expelling them and giving them to anyone else doesn't feel as good as you think. And you lose parts of who you really are, and you lose human interaction, and you lose all those great gains that we get just from being good people to each other by being a global populace as opposed to a singular one or an exclusive one or a xenophobic one. He wouldn't. I think he would. Yeah, he wants to get out. He wants to get out of that green zone. It's not where he's from, and he's had to build this devise this sort of bizarre persona that, as Laura says, is almost too sunny. He's a little bit. You can't say too perfect because that's not perfect at all. But you know, cleanly dressed and really slick and really sharp, and it's just synthetic. And he knows that that's not who he is, and that he's had to just create this alter ego to get in and get out as quickly as possible. The problem is nothing is as simple as that. And eventually, you know, does the end justify the means, or is this the life he was always meant to really live?
And I know we've only seen the premiere episode, but we haven't seen the other 9 from the first season, Ted. But, I mean, we don't see much of life in the red zone. I mean, we have seen a little bit, but it looks like all glamorous. And if maybe some young kid watching this is, I want to be in that world. I want to be in the green zone. Do you show enough of the red zone in the coming episodes? Or
we do. We spend a great... In fact, episode 2 begins with... we take a flashback... about 12 years, and we see Sean's character, Ben, as a kid, and he is, in fact, a climate refugee. I laugh just because it's a concept that, thankfully, we haven't quite reached in the real world. But and the idea being that large parts of even the United States are uninhabitable at this point, and people are flooding north, which we allude to here. And so we see him in a refugee camp that's similar to refugee camps for other reasons, but in this case, it's for climate. We spend a great deal of time in the red zone, and you're not wrong though about a kid or anybody watching and saying, "Gee, the green zone looks nice." One of the things that was amazing to me, to all of us, when we did test screenings for the show, is that people would watch, and we're presenting a very dystopian future, a future where there's terrible scarcity, and yet the reaction that we would get is people saying, "Wow, I want a car that drives itself. I want those screens that hover in midair." They were very wowed by the technology and by the ease of life in the green zone, and I thought that was just a very interesting commentary on, you know, terrifying or amusing, but an interesting commentary on how people consume. So,
thank you. I think I would like to turn to the audience now if they have any questions, and I would like to maybe ask. You identify yourself, and once I give you the floor, you go down and you press the button. When it goes red, you can introduce yourself and try to be brief so that we can give the largest number of questions. We'll take maybe 3 questions to start with, and then we'll ask the distinguished panelists to answer those. So who wants to ask a question? I see one there. one here. We have two men. Let's have a woman. Where?
That man is going to rip his arms off at the top up there.
Okay, here. Okay. Hopefully we'll get another round. So maybe we start with the young man there who was first.
Hi, I'm Michael. I work with the Department of Safety and Security. I was just curious, prior to filming, what kind of research was done about climate change, and did you consult any UN documents or UN officials for the movie, for the TV show?
I understand. See, this is this new technology. So, my name is Brad, and I'm a journalist and written about some of these things, also the filmmaking process. So I'm curious, when you did you have some way in which it's not so much about climate change as it is about the culture of the corporate culture versus the street culture. Did you have conversations that to immerse the cast in, and did you guys talk about it in certain ways as to sort of how you adopted your characters and assumed the identities and how you would interact with each other?
Okay,
maybe
thanks.
in rehearsal or.
Last question for the first round. You know the drill.
Yeah, of course. Aisata from the New York City Mayor's Office for International Affairs. Thank you so much for doing this movie, but specifically I wanted to ask whether you thought about the role that young people could play in climate change, specifically because of the young man that is in the red zone and is actually fighting his way, I guess, to go back to the green zone and selling cigarettes and all of that. We have the pleasure of working with young people, and we always emphasize their role in climate change. So are you going to explore those issues? Thanks.
Thank you. Just a comment that actually our collaboration, and Cassie will speak to that, and Ted, I guess, is that we have provided UN experts in the writer's room. But also, one of the things that we have done in the past with another show called Revolution is that we collaborated with the show in the social media campaign that goes with the show afterwards and linking it to UN messaging issues and experts. But maybe Ted and Cassie, you want to talk about more about the question on the back?
Sure. I mean, I want to be clear. We've done a tremendous amount of research for the show, both written research that is escaping me right now. We've talked to a number of experts. Will Sarney at Deloitte, who's an expert in water scarcity. Cassie here was in our writer's room and provided us with a lot of material on climate change. I do want to be clear. We're presenting a very, very extreme version of what climate change we could expect in the next, say, 60 to 70 years, which is the time frame of the show. We do that, obviously, for the purpose that we're trying to tell an exciting show and to show something that is, not as extreme, doesn't allow you the storytelling opportunities. That said, none of us know, obviously, what exactly is going to happen over the next 16, 70 years, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can to ensure the best future for all of us.
Just to say, it was such a pleasure to visit the writing room, and I had the chance to sit with Ted and to sit with the writing team, and they really started with the questions of what if, and the thing about climate change is that it can be big ideas, but it's also very, very small ones. You know, when you have an apple every day, where that apple comes from and how that apple grows will be affected by climate change. If you like chocolate, how you travel, this is all impacted. And we had a chance to kind of dive in to those questions in the writing room about when you do take it to an extreme and when you do look at these issues from this personal standpoint, what does life look like? And it was a lot of fun to engage on those issues.
A couple of questions about the corporations and government and the questions here. Do you want to? Or
I'm so sorry, could you repeat the question?
I was curious about how you framed the corporate culture versus the sort of the street culture or the anti-culture, and how each of you as actors discussed it among with the showrunners and writers, and in a way to create this sort of ominous quality that I think all the characters project.
Sure, I'll certainly, the cast should chime in on that. The only thing I'll say is that we very much wanted the show. One of the things that I think is very important about the show and interesting about the show is that it doesn't feel you're not watching Star Wars. It doesn't feel like you're in some different world that you don't recognize. And it was very important to us to present a world that, even though it's in the future, you sort of can see our world in it. People don't dress a whole lot differently than they do today, at least in the business world. They don't talk or act that much differently than they do today. Their offices kind of look like ours do. And all of the technology that they use, we were very scrupulous about either finding things that currently exist or that are in prototype form, such as driverless cars and these kind of hovering screens and whatnot. For the red zone, it's a little more freeform and a little more complicated, and we don't have Eddie Ramos with us, who plays Theo in the show, who's kind of our red zone character, but I'll let these three corporate types weigh in on what preparation they did.
I've never worked in an office, so I spent a lot of time researching that. No, I have the fortune, I guess, on this one of playing a character that comes from both worlds. So, although the Ben that you see and you witnessed at the beginning there is the only character you're currently introduced to, there's someone very different behind him. This alter ego, or this other age, an 18-year-old sort of climate refugee camp genius in some sort of way, hacker sort of extraordinaire, and I got the best of both worlds. You see a kid, and they both very much. I think my character the entire time has two fundamentally different internal motions butting against each other, and that's either Ben or Aaron, or it's green or red, or it's Laura and Elena. You can choose to depict them any way you want, but there are these two grinding notions of this new clean green life and this very real raw red one that's the life that you want to be, you don't have anymore. And so I got to see both ends of that, and I talked a lot with Ted and the brothers, because making a TV show in the future, you need some sort of biblical text. You need some sort of the confines that the world works within, the effects that technology have had on these people, how much lazier they are than they used to be, whatever. All these interactions, I mean, we're all regressing to the point where we all grow up with carpal tunnel by the age of 14 because we're already texting so much. These things would have had an effect on the people in the 70s as well, in the 2070s that I'm referring to casually as the 70s. So they do. So we talked a lot about that because it's hard to understand. I mean, me and Julia spent a lot of time. We all did in scenes going, like, what is it that this means? Because there's a lot of moments that in a real world, in a modern world, a current world would have made sense, but in the future is entirely different, has entirely different meaning. So we spent a lot of time talking about it. It was a lot of cross-country calls, a lot of cross-country phone calls at 5 a.m. before we started shooting.
Julia and Daz, do you want to add a bit?
I think what I would say is that I guess on the part of what drew me to the project is having worked on the issue of forced labour in supply chains and the transparency law through Asset Campaign, is that you get a window into the challenges that corporations face and the degree to which they're potentially in defensive crouch, or they're collectively there is influence on the world, either engagement or not as much engagement as you would like them to take up. And for me, what was, and that hits all of the sustainability, the goals, the degree to which corporate, I think Michael Posner, who's Assistant Secretary of State, has listed of the top 100 economies, 50 of them are businesses. So we do currently live in a world where business has agency as an economy. Walmart is the 31st largest economy in the world. And unless you have business shifting from a dynamic that is a profit, short-term profit deliver, then it doesn't have the same center, it doesn't have the same responsibility as government. So for me, I guess it was attractive to see this world where that corporations have taken over, but they haven't shifted to long-term stakeholder responsibility, and the delivers around things like the sustainability goals that they could do. And what I feel from playing Elizabeth, who my conversations with Ted was, yes, I get that, but does she have to be such a cow? And it was really important to me that there was some...
There was a lot of this.
There was. Every conversation, is she less of a cow this week? And to try and find that emotional heart. And it's really interesting because our work has sort of taken us around. If you look at, people who are working with workers in Bangladesh factories, what they're discovering there, just as much as here, is what we all want as human beings, is to be respected by our families, to have a dignified job, and to be respected at work. And I have never played someone who is such a cow and who doesn't feel the family respect, because as a parent, she didn't deliver. They haven't delivered for everyone. And it's one of the most stressful roles I've ever played, which is bizarre because she's supposed to be the person sitting on all the stuff that the haves have versus the have-nots.
Dennis?
Well, Julian is, I think, unique to both these people. He dresses similarly to the executives, but he is not an executive. He is the head of security. He's charged with keeping these people safe and also trying to find out which one of them is a traitor, which one of them is telling secrets. So it's kind of the inter-corporation policeman, part detective, part, Grand Inquisitor. I don't like them. I don't know if you could tell that. I'm kind of a rebel. I'm the only one that has facial hair. I don't know if you noticed the little, soul patch. It goes by another name, but I won't say that here. But he does this job because he has to, and at the risk of giving any spoiler alerts, you'll see as the show continues how he evolves and how much compassion he does have. I think it's safe to say if he had his druthers, he would probably live off the grid, outside the red zone and outside the green. I don't know if you saw the little symbol on his hand. That will come to mean something very serious later on, which is why they spent so much time on it. But I wish I could tell you, oh God, there's so many things I can say about this character. But I love this guy. I love Julian for the fact that he, for all of his apparent inhumanity, he has a lot of humanity.
So my colleagues are telling me that we have to end this because we have the room until 8:30, but I'm going to overrule them and maybe take 2 more questions. And this gentleman here and this lady here. And we'll come back to your question once we hear. Yes. So, just straight down from the microphone, there's a silver button. That's the one.
Go. Hi, everyone. I'm Simon Applebaum. I'm the producer and host of Tomorrow Will Be Televised. It's a show all about television on Blog Talk Radio. Ted, one of the things we're seeing in television right now is a lot of people who have never done television, independent filmmakers, journalists, authors, playwrights, produce television. They not just create a show, but they also run the show. It sounds like this is another example of it with Alan and David, filmmakers in Spain. Why did you decide that, not just you, but we should say Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and Jennifer, the other executive producers, why did you all decide that their vision was the vision about climate change and the vision about society as a whole that you wanted to present?
Well, I can't speak. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, hi. My name is Deborah Goodridge from UNDP. I'm always curious about the film world in general. Do you make a conscious effort to discuss climate change and carbon footprint in your filming, while you're filming, and jet setting all over using jets and everything, and greening of filmmaking? I'm always curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get to that. But so if you want to talk about youth to start with, and then the other 2 questions, and we will call it a wrap.
I think one of the challenges, certainly about climate change, is sometimes the impacts seem very far away. We talk about icebergs, we talk about rainforests, we see pictures of polar bears on icebergs floating, and it's easy to feel like there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. And I think that as we are starting to see more and more the impacts of climate change, and as we are experiencing things like Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Matthew, and we're starting to have reports more around drought, and for example, in the U.S., the corn prices spiking because of drought. We're starting to see, I think, people shift their thinking on climate, and nowhere is this more relevant or evident than with youth. We see more youth saying that climate change is an issue that we care about our future, and we want to do something about it. And it is incredibly inspiring when you start looking at the number of youth that are engaged in this. And certainly there are more and more avenues for young people to get more engaged. Certainly we see a lot of activity at the city level through the mayor's office. We see activity through the UN, youth around the world, and people wanting to get involved in their own communities. And I know certainly there's an effort for that in association with the Sustainable Development Goals, and otherwise where people can, all people of all ages can look to get more involved.
With the youth and the role of young people talking about climate change, I'm 24 years old, so I'm not the oldest and I'm not the youngest person in the world. But I'm very fortunate working on jobs like this that I get to meet with actors that are more experienced, that have lived around, that are selfless and giving, and that fight for a lot of relevant things. But I find that our generation, this generation that I might be a part of, is incredibly impassioned, politically very stimulated. But we very much understand this is our world that we might lose. It's very easy for some older generations to maybe worry about the instant 4-year term worries that they have and their close short-term goals. I understand that they have that prerogative, but for us, any of these decisions or indecisions or lack of action is what's going to affect our world in the future. We're going to have to pick up pieces that we didn't necessarily drop. And so we need to, I understand entirely this is an actor sitting here talking to you about things that so many other people do more for, and it's not fair. But this is one of the benefits of doing a job like this, is that you can come and talk about things that are relevant and that matter. And if we can manage to persuade anyone at any level to just care a little bit more, or to understand that it's their world too. If you're a parent, I mean, my parents, my mum especially, is incredibly passionate about these things, and I got that from her. I get this from work, I get it from Julia, I get it from Dennis. But if your children maybe just haven't been given that information or just aren't impassioned by it, try and invigorate them, because we're the people that matter. No, we are not the people that matter. We're not the only people that matter, obviously. But it's really important to get these people, because we can do things. I mean, 15-year-old girls are the most powerful force of people on the planet. They dominate the internet. There's like 3 of them here, and they terrify me. They're so powerful, and if we can talk about things, not the common, sort of celebrity showbiz or whatever else doesn't matter, whatever gives you fulfillment, then fine. But if we can make them care about these things as well, then by Christ, we've done something right. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I loved the youth question. I think it's so relevant, and I think one of the things that we've seen, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and even like really young people, kids who are coming up in elementary, and there's a combination of emphasis on STEM, on science, technology, engineering, and math, and they in elementary school were challenged to reduce packaging, to take packaging from well-known sort of office supply store. And you kind of go, okay, so if a 6-year-old can reduce the packaging and do a massive deliver for the environment, these are the sorts of things that schools are looking for. And I think there's another sort of local school challenge, little grants that I think can encourage kids to compete and get their heads around stuff. It really gets them salivating. It also teaches kids that they're enabled by it. Their agents have changed. They don't have to wait on us to come up with the solutions, but they can come up with themselves. And these kids who are local middle school kids came up with a device that monitored how much water you were using once you were letting the tap flow. And just the numbers running up was enough to raise your awareness in terms of, oh, I guess I should shut that off. And I think to actually go to children and engage them when they're the next consumer, when they're the millennial consumer, actually starts to resonate with companies, and then companies can join in the debate too.
So maybe I can ask Ted and Dennis to answer the last 2 questions.
Sure. I'll address yours. I can't speak for anybody else, Matt, Ben, Jennifer, anybody. For me, the reason why this was the vehicle that I chose to get involved in is because it was the one that was presented to me. Which sounds simple, but I was never looking to tell a story about climate change or about growing income inequality or about where's the world going to be in 70 years. I was looking to tell a good story about anything. I'm always looking to tell a good story about anything. It's my job. And so when a good story fell into my lap and it happened to connect to all these issues, that's great. I think the story works on its own. I think that we're here at the United Nations and we're talking about sustainable development goals, and that's wonderful. Many people in the audience may not get that from it, or they will get a good story. And if all they get is a good story, that's fine. If some of them are encouraged to think a little bit about the world today and what can we do to ensure a better tomorrow for everybody, more the better.
I've given this a great deal of thought. I have two children. I have a daughter that's 22 and a son that's 25. And they are activated. They are very much in tune as to what's going on in the world. But none of this means anything unless the corporations and the children of corporate bosses get to them. My kids get to me, and I tell them how I work. My passion is water. I have a rain catcher myself. It should be, compulsory. But in some places, like Colorado, it's illegal to catch rain. In most places in South America, you can be killed for catching rain. So if the corporations don't come to grips, and the children of those corporate leaders don't talk to them, don't talk to their parents, and get them to understand that how much is too much, how much is the greed, and to what extent and to what cost does that greed have, to the places and and all the countries of the world. It's really not going to matter what the kids do, unless they're going to get into that corporate world and change it from within. Unless the corporate leaders acknowledge that this is taking place, nothing's going to happen.
Thank you all. I think I am reminded again that we really had to end here, but I would like to first thank Sean, Dennis, Julia, Ted, Cassie, and all of you for being with us today. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you very much, and good night. One of the things that I wanted to know, but I didn't ask, is when we first met Ted in June, we asked, you talk about the American capital going to Milwaukee, but where is the United Nations?
And we didn't deal with it. Season 2.